I'm Glenn Campbell. I call myself a demographic philosopher. I'm looking at life and trying to predict the future through the lens of demography, or the study of human populations. Today I want to talk about discrimination. And there is good discrimination and bad discrimination. I'm going to talk about the difference between the two. When you make a decision of any kind, whether you're trying to choose an employee or choose what you're going to eat today or choose how you spend your time, you're making a choice based on certain criteria. And you can make a discriminatory choice where you're choosing based on some superficial criteria that really isn't important, or you can make a discriminating choice where you're looking at some deep attribute of the thing you are selecting and basing it on some functional criteria. And ultimately, this is applicable to human reproduction because anytime you decide to have a baby, by whatever means, you need other people for that project. You need other people to at least donate a gamete to that project to make a baby. And that's a selection process, and you can make that selection on a discriminating basis or a discriminatory basis. So let me give you a simple example. Let's say I'm buying a video camera. And I happen to know a lot about video cameras because I've been using them for 10 years. I've been making videos for 10 years. I've owned a lot of video cameras. So if I had to buy a video camera today, I would be a very discriminating buyer because I know a lot about video cameras and I know what features I need and what sort of quality I need. So I'm going to home in quickly on the best camera model for my purposes. Now, if someone didn't have any experience with video cameras and they were buying them for the first time, they would not be so discriminating. They would be more discriminatory, where they're looking at some surface attribute of the camera, like its brand name. Is it a Sony or a Canon or a JVC? And they'd be looking at what the camera looks like and how long the list of features is. And they would be making their choice based on some superficial criteria that probably doesn't reflect on what the camera really does. So they're going to make a poorer choice. They're going to make a discriminatory choice based on the color of the camera instead of how well the camera works. And this sort of thing applies to every kind of selection that you make. If you're a hiring manager who wants to hire someone to do a specific job, you can either look at superficial criteria like their skin color or where they came from or where their degrees come from. Or you can try to figure out some deep way to judge this person. You can ask them a lot of questions. You can put them through tests that are applicable to the job that you want them to do. That is the discriminating way to do things. You're looking at trying to get at the deep structure of things to figure out whether this product is going to work for you. Or you can do it in a discriminatory manner where you're just looking at some trivial surface attribute. This can be a lot harder than it sounds because discriminatory is often masquerading as discriminating. For example, an ad for a luxury car company might say, it's for the discriminating buyer. And they'll point out the workmanship of the console and the wood-grained paneling. And all these things they're supposed to make you want to buy the car. But really, if you're going to buy this car, you're being discriminatory in that you think that this is a valuable item because it's very expensive and it has all this wood paneling and everything. If you really care about the function of the car, meaning how well the car gets you from point A to point B and does it economically and without requiring a lot of repairs, that has nothing to do with its luxury value. That has more to do with facts and figures about how often this car needs to be maintained and what its gas mileage is. So if you have a lot of experience with cars and just care about the function of the car, you're going to be a discriminating buyer. If you're just looking at the surface attributes of the car, like how pretty it is, you're a discriminatory buyer. And this applies to human reproduction. Even if you're producing humans in the traditional way, in that you're falling in love with someone, you're marrying them and having children with them, well, you've got a very important selection to make, namely who your partner is going to be. And you can make this selection on superficial grounds, on like how pretty or handsome they are, or you can make it on deep grounds, which is how well they can do the job of parenting. And unfortunately, being a discriminating buyer in anything requires a lot of experience. Just like I've had 10 years of experience with video cameras, which tells me how to buy video cameras, you need a fair amount of experience in romance and relationships before you become a discriminating buyer in who you marry. And unfortunately, many people, or if not most people, get into relationships without this body of experience. So they end up choosing their partner on superficial grounds, on discriminatory grounds, and end up with someone who isn't doing the job, isn't performing the duties required of them of being a good a partner and a good parent. Now, this would also extend to my new form of family, what I call the modular family, where you have a lot of adults caring for a lot of children. The adults who form this family, they have to decide among themselves who's going to be a member of this group. This is a selection process where you have to decide who's going to contribute to your group and who you don't want to select because they're not ultimately not going to be an asset. Just like marriage, when you decide to form a family with a bunch of other adults, you're in it for the long haul. So you've got to be very careful about who you let into this group. And unfortunately, when any group like this starts up, they don't have a lot of experience to work with. They haven't seen the effects of making a bad decision yet. So this is a very dangerous time, a time when you are forming your family. Be it a family of 2 or a family of 20, the time that you're forming your family is a very critical time when you've got to distinguish between criteria that are discriminatory and discriminating. To be discriminating, you have to understand the underlying function of whatever product you are buying. When you obtain food, the underlying function of that food is nutrition, how well it maintains your body. When you buy a car, the underlying function is how well does it get you from point A to point B with a minimum of cost and a minimum of maintenance. And when you're selecting a parenting partner, you're also selecting for some deep function, because no matter what they look like, no matter how sexually attractive they are, what really matters in the long run is how well they perform this function. And it's really difficult to distinguish whether you're looking at some trivial, superficial trait or something that's deep that really means something. So all of us, every day, are going through these processes of trying to figure out, is this really a good criteria for selecting whatever it is I'm selecting? Discrimination in the bad sense is a real thing in the world, and it has damaged many people's lives. Many people have not had the opportunities that other people have simply because of their skin color or the place that they were born. Some people have advantages, some people have disadvantages, and this is something that society wants to try to even out. Society wants to give everybody a fair shake. Unfortunately, when you get to the point of wanting to choose somebody or choose a product to serve a need, the fact that someone has been discriminated against in the past should be irrelevant to your choice. For example, if you're a hiring manager and you're trying to hire an air traffic controller, somebody who a lot of lives are going to depend on, who has to have a certain personality and a certain set of technical skills. Well, the only thing that really should matter is whether they have these skills. It doesn't matter where they came from or how they were educated. What it matters is how well they can do the job. And you've got to select the best candidate for the job, really regardless of their background. Because if you don't, then a lot of lives could be lost in an air crash if you don't have the right personnel for this particular job. And it's no different when you're selecting a partner to make a baby with. What really matters is how well they can do this job. Unfortunately, people tend to look at a person's background. Once they get to know a romantic partner pretty well, they know their background and they know, well, they had a tough childhood. And they're willing to make excuses for that childhood where they don't accept the best partner. They don't accept the best person for the job. You can fight for equality in society, that's fine. But when you're selecting a product or a person for a particular task, it is your responsibility to seek the best product, regardless of its background. And it's your responsibility to find some deep criteria that will reflect on the needs that you will have in the future. Although discrimination is a real thing, it is unjust. It is not necessarily your job to right all of the wrongs of the past. Your job is to select the best product to serve your current needs. It's not an easy selection process, but it has to happen. You can't be making any kind of decision without some form of discrimination. You just want it to be a valid form of discrimination and not an invalid form. So just remember these simple rules whenever you're making a choice. Discriminatory is bad. Choosing based on some superficial surface criteria is bad. You want to find criteria that most accurately reflect the presumed skills or function of the product you are selecting. And the second thing you need to remember is that the past of this thing you are selecting should have no bearing on the selection process that you are making. If you're doing important things in life, and raising children is an important thing, then every choice you make is like hiring an air traffic controller. You want somebody or something that has the right qualifications and the right kind of personality to serve the needs you have. Like it or not, lives depend on this choice, so you've got to give it a lot of attention. You want to make sure you're employing the right kind of discrimination and not the wrong kind of discrimination.